Meeting Monday, June 2nd, 2025 at 6:30 PM, now in session. All those rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item number 3 on the agenda is roll call. Here.
Maloney.
Present.
Williamson.
Here.
Jensen.
Present.
Paul.
Present.
Thank you. Item number 4, consent agenda. 4A, minutes city council meetings for May 5th and May 14th, 2025. 4B, claims totaling $599,308.29. That includes e-checks 3838E-3863E and checks 1400090 to check 140158. 4C, approve the sale of 2017 and 2015 Police Explorers to Timothy Tweed. 4D, resolutions to approve community garden donations. And 4E, authorize hiring of seasonal public work employee Alex Stanke. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as read?
I'll make that motion.
I have a motion from Councilmember Maroney. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Councilmember Jensen. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Moving on, item 5, open forum. Is there anybody here that is attending that wishes to address the council in open forum? I'll ask again, is there anybody here that wishes to address the council in open forum? Hearing there is no one, open forum is now closed. Item 6 on the agenda, Woodseth Engineering. 6A, Road Capitals Improvement Plan. Good evening.
Is this on?
I think it should be. You might want to clip. Yep,
You hear me?
yep.
Okay.
Yep, kind of got to get it up close.
All right. I'd like to preface this by saying there was a few things in your packet that were not directly intended for presentation. A few of the items were raw data tabs from our spreadsheet that we sent to the city as a tool for budgeting purposes, so the city might be able to investigate some of these different roads to be improved in different years on their own. They can obviously reach out to us at any time too for assistance, but delivered that as a additional tool for the city, and a couple of the data tabs got put into your packet, so if you see anything that looks a little interesting with some highlighting and maybe the formatting's not presentable, that's where that's from. But those tabs are vital to the actual deliverables that are in the CIP. I'm going to go through the capital improvement plan executive summary for the sake of time here. And feel free to stop me and ask any questions along the way. No need for me to just ramble the whole time if you have anything to say. So, in response to the RFP, we inventoried all the city streets. Pavement ratings were assigned to all of the paved roads, and we created an associated map. We created budget numbers for paved roads based on the condition assessment and recommended improvements and timing for each of the paved roads. We also inventoried gravel and minimum maintenance road and created a maintenance map. We did a streetlight inventory mapping for the streetlights and recommended streetlight location, sidewalk and trail assessment mapping and recommendations for repair and expansion, street sign inventory of city-owned streetlights and replacement plan, sanitary sewer inventory and recommended replacement, storm sewer inventory, and a storm sewer map. So for the paved road summary, we conducted a field review for each paved city street. we created a road rating list of 1 through 5 and assigned corresponding improvements to each of the ratings. The majority of the city's paved roads are in the rating of 2 and 4. So rating 1 is a road that's in good standing condition today. We expect to see 10 to 15 years of life out of that road. 5 being the worst condition, and we recommend a full reconstruct of that road. There's a table including the estimated cost per square yard for each of those improvements. So there are 113 paved roads in the city for a total of 42.9 miles. The estimated total cost to improve all of the paved roads in the city with a road rating of 2 through 5, so that excludes the rating of 1. We did not include that in this estimate because those roads today do not see the need for any capital improvements now, just routine maintenance. That number is $16.5 million, including engineering services. We recommend completing that routine maintenance on those roads of road rating 1 for the next 10 to 15 years, and also doing spring inspections to make sure that there's no roads that are degrading faster than anticipated. With the city's current road budget, it's estimated to take more than 50 years to replace all of the roads. There's a breakdown, a timeline of the anticipated cost per year for a 10, 15, and 20-year replacement plan. The majority of these roads are not vastly above the city's current budget, but there are a handful of them that are higher on that rating, and longer roads such as Dove Street and portions of Ranchette that have a substantially higher cost than a lot of the other roads. In the tables of the CIP, we selected some roads that fit the city's current budget, but we also showed that there are several roads that will exceed that budget. And the city should plan for and budget for those roads to be improved in the future. So there is a pie chart with a breakdown for paved roads showing the total improvement cost per road rating. Those roads with a rating of 1 total 5.71 miles at 14% of the total roads, paved roads that is, and we recommend routine maintenance for the next 10 to 15 years. A larger portion of 45% for a rating of 2, which would be the improvement for that type of road would be an 1.5 inch overlay, totaling 19.15 miles with a total, in today's 2025 construction dollars, a total improvement cost of $4.875 million. Road rating of 3, which is a mill and inlay, more typical with roads that have curb and gutter or roads that have a potential drainage issue if you were to overlay an 1.5 inches. Some roads that have tighter, like a lot of driveways such as North Lakeview, I believe is the road name that goes along Pelican there. And then road rating of 4, having 28%, which would be a full depth reclamation, estimated at around $7 million. And a road rating of 5, which is roads that are recommended to need a full reconstruct, estimated at $3.2 million, roughly. Any questions on paved roads?
Questions from the council?
Yeah, just maybe a point of clarification. So the 16.5 million, if the city were to improve all paved roads with a condition of 2 to 5 today, so does that amount fit into what's identified within the 10-year plan then? I'm trying to, when I think about that number and then go down to the table over the 10, 15, 20-year period, in my mind, I should come up with 16.5 million. But what I don't know is the cost, so that's the cost per year over that 10-year period?
That's the
Is that what we're
cost per
saying?
year over a 10-year period.
Okay,
Yep, sorry if that's not explained
no, it's fine.
accurately. There's, in the full CIP, there's a table of each of the paved roads with their corresponding dollars per square yard for improvement, and those are broken out into which roads we recommend replacing for each year. And that table more closely fits your current budget right now. The 10, 15, and 20 year was just kind of an example of what our total estimated cost would be for those timeframes. For gravel roads, we inventoried 51 of the city's total gravel roads for 12.1 miles. They range in width from 12 to 24 feet, with the majority being 20 to 22 feet. City has a current budget for supplemental aggregate and dust coat and other things of $69,000. We incorporated that into the CIP, but we do not have any capital improvement costs for gravel roads. The city's current policy for improving gravel roads to paved is based on petition. And due to this, and with talks with this city staff and the streets committee, we've not included any costs for improving gravel roads to paved in this 10-year CIP. So again, there's an inventory for gravel roads there, showing their total lengths and widths. Any questions on gravel roads?
Any questions from council?
So there wasn't any review or assessment done on an estimated cost of bringing gravel roads then up to a paved city standard?
Not directly. They vary a lot in width, and in the full CIP, there is some recommendations for the city that if you were to improve these gravel roads and you wanted to maintain your current typical section standard for a road, some of these roads would have to be widened, which would, increase the cost over just paving right over that gravel road. So we did not incorporate any cost to pave any of those roads based on recommendations from staff and the streets committee. For minimum maintenance roads, there are 38 total at about 7.3 miles. Again, no recommendations for capital improvements on those roads at this time. Streetlights, city currently maintains 4 streetlights. There's a streetlights map, and there are also 3 county-maintained streetlights in city limits. We've identified 5 additional locations for streetlights of areas of higher traffic. The cost to install those lights, if the city chooses to do so, is incorporated with those individual roads at the time of improvement in the spreadsheet. Estimated at about $25,000 per light pole, but that cost can vary widely depending on the utilities in the area. How close is the nearest power that they can bring over there. So. For street signs, we utilize GIS to store the data we collected. We collected data on sign age, condition, location, type, and photos for each sign. In talks with the streets committee and city staff, we went with the age replacement method, and that is replacing signs, recommending to replace signs once they reach 15 years of age or more. This is a pretty typical way of replacing signs for communities like Breezy Point. The city has 883 total signs, and today there are 256 of those signs that are 15 years of age or older, 195 that are 15 years of age or newer, and there are over 400 signs that do not have an age identifying sticker. Many of those are like road signs. Those typically don't have an age identifying sticker, so those can be replaced as seen fit. We do have all of these stored in GIS, and to my knowledge, the city does not utilize GIS today, but if the city ever were to utilize GIS, that is your system to have as well. It has all the data in it. So. For sanitary sewer, we inventoried the city's sanitary sewer system, and the majority of the sewer system was installed in 1978, and the vast majority of the sewer system is 8-inch PVC, with the life expectancy of PVC being 50 to 100 years, probably closer to 100 years or more, honestly. There's no recommended capital improvements for replacing any of the sanitary sewer system today. That does not go for the wastewater treatment facility, which we are still doing the feasibility report on. That's for the collection system. There's also a lift station inventory and recommended replacement plan for pumps and things in the lift station. any other questions so far?
Questions from council? Follow-ups? Please continue.
Inventorying the city's storm sewer system. Much of that was installed in 2007. Life expectancy for concrete storm sewer pipe is typically over 50 years. So no recommendations for replacement of anything in the storm sewer system. It exists on Airport Road and Breezy Point Drive, and there's a series of infiltration basins in both of those locations. The only recommendation for storm sewer is when the city does get around to improving those two roads of Airport Road and Breezy Point Drive, that we take a further look at that time in case it's farther into the future. When those improvements happen, that would be the time to address anything that would be uncovered during construction there. So. And sidewalks and trails, inventory for that. About 1.1 miles of bituminous trail, and there's 2.3 miles of gravel or natural trails. There's an inventory for those and cost estimation and timeline for improvements in the CIP tables as well. So that's all I have for the executive summary. Is there any other questions on the CIP as a whole?
Any follow-up questions from the council at this point? Anything they wish to add? Okay. No, I think you did a nice job of covering it and giving us the overview, and of course, all the details are in here, so.
Correct.
We appreciate Woodseth's work on it and getting this to us, and it'll be a piece that we use to move our process forward, so. Let's see. Let's just move on then to hearing no other questions on the capital improvement plan or any discussion. I think we've kind of talked about it. We're going to continue to work forward on the CIP. Of course, we'll be looking with budgeting and things of that and start thinking about how we want to work with that going forward too. So this is just the first step with that, but it's what we needed to kind of have a game plan or something to look at, so. 6B, sanitary sewer extension, airport to terminal.
Yes, so in your packet are the plans for the sewer extension. These plans include horizontal directional drilling from the existing manhole on Airport Road to the proposed manhole location on Terminal Road. The proposed manhole is roughly 23 feet deep. This allows for the city to do any future expansion. For that depth would allow for gravity sewer along Red Oak and Terminal Road down to the distances we provided in the feasibility study, covering much of Terminal Road and I think it was roughly 2/3 of Red Oak Road, till there's a lot of grade change that you wouldn't be able to get it with gravity sewer. You'd have to have a force main system there. So that depth allows for that amount of gravity fed expansion in the future. So I guess we're requesting authorization to go out for bids on this. It was the city's desire to approve the low bidder at the next council meeting, so we're prepared to advertise on June 11th for 2 weeks and then have a bid opening on June 25th. I'm not sure if we'd be able to use this location for the bid opening if these plans are approved, or we could find an alternate location as well.
I think we could use this place if we needed to. Administrator Bonsack, you fine with that?
I think this works just fine.
Okay, yeah, so, yep.
Any questions on the plans?
Yeah, are there any questions from council on the plans or specifications? It's pretty much laid out. I mean, if you took the time to look through it, it's pretty straightforward of what needs to happen, so.
I guess there is, if I may, there is one other thing that we added to this. The proposed manhole location, we moved north on Terminal Road due to the amount of existing utilities in the County Road 11 corridor. In doing that, our alignment for the force main cuts through the Commander property, and we provided a sketch and description for a permanent utility easement through that parking lot. So I've been in talks with Jerry about that.
I've had conversations with Mr. Narveson about the easement. He has assured us that he will cooperate in the easement and sign it, and it won't cost us anything to do that, so.
Very good. Okay, thank you for that piece of information. All right, are there any other questions? If not, I'd look for a motion to approve the plans and specifications and authorize advertisements for bids for this project.
So moved.
I have a motion from Councilmember Ball. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second from Councilmember Maroney. Any further discussion on this? All right, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, moving on. Item 7, approve city administrator contract for Ally Pulsfuss, 7A employment agreement. Anything Administrator Bonesack you want to give us for information, or?
The contract is prepared by our attorney. It appears in your packet. It has been signed by Ally. She is waiting for your approval this evening. The expected start date is July 1.
Okay, great. Excellent. All right, do I have a motion to approve the contract for Ally?
I'll make that motion.
I have a motion from Councilmember Maroney. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second from Councilmember Jensen. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
Aye. And I just want to clarify, I'm abstaining due to the fact that I unfortunately really wasn't able to be a part of the interviewing process. The interview dates, how things needed to go forward did not align well at all with my work schedule. So I feel like really not having had any direct involvement, understanding of the candidates themselves, it likely doesn't make sense for me to vote one way or another. It's certainly not a reflection of my support or lack of support for the council's decision.
Duly noted. The motion passes. So we look forward to having Ally starting with us on July 1st. And I believe that she's already reached out to our current administrator to have some conversations. So that's good. It's good news. So, all right, moving on. Item 8, accept resignation, Parks and Recreation Committee members. 8A, resignation letters. They were provided to you in the packet. If we look, let's see, let me jump to those. Sorry, I'm scrolling down. Come on. There's so much. Almost there. There. Yep. Okay. All right. So we have a resignation letter from Bill Toft dated Tuesday, May 6th, was sent to our administrator and our clerk, and reads, committee members believe that serving one's community is a privilege and that one should give their best for the taxpayers of that community. I've always done my research and sought out the experts from the CEOs, CFOs, to the former law enforcement, to attorneys. I have the greatest respect for our police force, public works department, and Breezy Point staff. I also have respect for the members of our committee. I, however, have reached a point that 2 council members and the mayor do not have, in my opinion, the Breezy Point taxpayers' best interest. I cannot enthusiastically be a part of any endeavor that does not honor its commitments to the voters who put them in their chairs. I hereby resign immediately and thank you for the privilege of serving Bill Toft. So that was one resignation. Then we received a second resignation from a Jody Miller dated Friday, May 9th. It was sent to our city clerk. And says, unfortunately, I will be moving outside the Breezy Point city limits July 1st, 2025, so I can no longer serve on the Parks and Rec Committee. I will, however, continue to be a part of the Breezy Point greater community, so I plan to volunteer on the Park and Rec's related events, initiatives in the future. I enjoyed the 6 months I was on this committee, and I'm very excited about the future plans that are being developed. With warm regards, Jody Miller. So those are the 2 resignation letters that were received. And I would ask for a motion to accept those resignations as so submitted.
I'll make a motion to receive those resignations.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Maroney. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Councilmember Ball. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? A motion carries. That brings us to item 9, discussion of Parks and Recreation Committee appointments. 9A, resolution that was signed and put into effect as of 5/2023 was to increase park board members from the standing number of 5 to 7. With these 2 resignations, it brings us back to 5, which was the original appointed group. I, at this time, would like to recommend to the council that we stay with the current 5. If we so choose, working with the park committee in the future to increase it to 7, we can do so. So I don't think there's a need to rescind the resolution, but just necessarily leave it as 5 at this point unless the council feels differently. That's my recommendation.
5 to me is fine. I think that's what Parks and Rec would prefer, the committees. So, I mean, it's fine.
I think
Any
it's
other-
fine too.
Okay?
Got no strong feeling one way or the other. I think going to 5 makes sense.
Okay. Councilmember Scott, any comments?
Yeah, I mean, it was increased to 7 with the idea of inviting more resident participation into the Parks and Rec Committee. I think there was a fair amount of hope at the time that interactions and communication would improve throughout city operations and when it comes to the folks that we have volunteering for our committees. And I think it's terribly unfortunate that we have people no longer willing to serve on the Park and Rec. And yeah, I guess I don't have any definitive feelings one way or another. I mean, there's a part of me that thinks we should keep it at 7. Understand out there who else might be actively willing to serve. But if the collective decision is to hold it at the current membership of 5, I don't see that being all that problemsome at the end of the day.
Okay. So what I would state is that we can keep it at 5. If the park committee approaches us and says, hey, we could really use the extra people, we're looking for other people to get involved, then we can definitely open it up. And I can review that again when it comes time for our committee appointments at the end of the year. So that's why I want to leave the resolution in place so that we have that ability to do it. We don't have to go back and start all over and do a new resolution. So it sounds like overall there's a consensus, so we will currently at this time leave the committee at 5, but the resolution stands in place. Okay. Moving on. Gotta get back up to my agenda number here. Okay. Item 10, Edgewater Circle Improvement. 10A, Edgewater Circle Road Improvements. Administrator Bonsack, you want to give us a little update?
This was a improvement of Edgewater Circle Road was prompted by Pelican Township, who is a co-owner of the majority of Edgewater Circle and has decided to do a full-depth reclamation of that road and has asked the city if they were willing to participate in doing approximately a quarter of the road, which amounted to about $21,000. That said, the council at the last meeting talked about this and we asked, or the council asked us to look into the possibility of how it fits with the current assessment policy and whether there would be assessments. I wrote a letter to the association basically telling them that they would be subject to the assessments based on the policy. And because it's over 15 years of age, it would be 100% assessed as per the policy. The representative from Edgewater called me. We had a conversation on the phone about the fact that this was their first notification. I did inform them that they could request a hearing on the improvement, and they have requested a hearing. So my suggestion is that we schedule a hearing for the next council meeting.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, if they want to come before us to speak to that, we can do that. And we could definitely schedule it in for the July meeting. I don't know what the feelings of the council are at this point, but I think it's probably the best way to move forward. They want to have a hearing on it, so we schedule in and we have the hearing, and then we can go from there and we can make a decision on what we're going to do after we've heard from them.
I would agree.
Okay. So we'll plan then to do you need a motion or approval? A
It would be a
motion?
motion to hold a public hearing on
Got
the improvement.
So I'd like to have a motion from the council if they're willing to give one for a public hearing on the improvements to Edgewater Circle Road and the assessments that would be assessed to the property owners in the city of Breezy Point.
So move.
I have a motion from Councilmember Maroney. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Councilmember Jensen. Any discussion on this? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Item 11 on the agenda, 11A, item 11 is parkland dedication discussion, 11A, parkland dedication. Administrator Bonsack.
Again, this was prompted by a request from a landowner that was doing a subdivision and felt that the current policy that required 10% of the value of the land was excessive for parkland dedication. So based on that, the council was sympathetic to that request, I believe, and did a request for us to look at possible alternative methods of allocating parkland dedication to subdivisions. We did just a short review of what other communities have done. We looked at Brainerd, Nisswa, Cross Lake, Pequot Lakes. And based on that, they all have an alternative that we do not have in our subdivision ordinance, which allows for a per unit assessment. Brainerd is $500 a single dwelling or buildable lot. Nisswa and Pequot Lakes have at $416 per expected resident. They base theirs on the fact that there's like an average of 2.3 residents per dwelling. So that fee would be almost $1,000 or very close to $1,000 per unit. And Cross Lake does $1,500 for each individual lot. They all have the 10% land dedication in their ordinances, which is no different than what we have. But they just have an alternative basically for small subdivisions that are based on per unit basis. When you look at that from a standpoint of fairness, I think that's probably fair. I think if you were to look at a unit basis, it would also allow you to do, when a subdivision comes in with say an apartment building, you would be able to base your park dedication fee on a per unit basis, which again gives you another alternative use. In each case of their ordinances, the choice is the council's. It isn't the landowners or the subdividers. It is the council's choice to use one method or the other. But I think maybe looking at a per unit basis gives you an alternative that you can use going down the line in the future.
Thank you for the information, Jerry, and for you guys putting that stuff together and getting it to us. I think it gives us some good information to be able to look at and decide maybe how we want to move forward. I don't know, are there any thoughts from the council members? Anybody want to speak to it? I know I'll just state by saying I looked this over, I read it over and did some thinking about it. I personally think that having an option in there is probably a good thing for us to have. Currently, our ordinance doesn't have that. We don't have anything in there. But adding this to it and maybe looking at a per dwelling unit, per dwelling, and setting whatever that rate is that allows us to have more than just one thing in there. For situations like I think what we're looking at right now, which is not a huge subdivision where we're having multiple units coming in, but instead we're having this one small, subdivision within. And maybe it addresses some of the concerns that we're seeing and it puts us kind of in line, I think, equitable wise with what we're seeing some of the other cities in the area doing too. So I don't know, that's just my thoughts, so I thought I'd open it up, but I'm open to what the other council
I
has.
would agree. I mean, we need the alternative option per unit. I mean, in the case of the property owner, I think 10% was excessive. I mean, council pretty much agreed upon that, and that's why we're here. It's on the agenda. It makes sense. And to Jerry's point, I think that's a good point. If we get apartment buildings to be able to do it on a per unit basis, makes sense.
Yeah.
So I would agree.
I know this portion of the packet was one of the questions that I do a recap with Administrator Bonsack before the meetings. And one of the questions, clarifications was Nisswa and Pequot Lakes doing a per resident. I read it as only per dwelling, and he clarified that no, they're doing it on a per resident basis,
Right.
which that gets into a muddy, I'm building it for myself versus I'm gonna have a family of 5 here. So I don't like the per resident basis. My question though, as hearing it over again and rethinking about when does the council choose which one goes 10% or, the fee per dwelling? Is it the lesser of two? Like, do we need, like, my thought process is if we do 10% for the first applicant and then we do per dwelling, how is that being chosen? And I'm wondering if we need language of the lesser of the two? My only concern, do you understand where my concern is? How do we choose which one to do?
To me, I think in part, drawing from the conversations we had last month gets to what are the issues with density being created. You almost have to look at it from a density standpoint and how the subdivision and addition arguably of more people puts added needs on our park and rec infrastructure. So I'd almost look at it like you need to probably establish a standard around when a subdivision gets into a certain level of density, then maybe you look at it on a per unit basis. And if it's of a lesser density, whatever that might be, then you look at it at maybe, the 10% sort of dedication.
And would you just, I'm listening to you, so then would it be like, would we look like, because when you talk about density, you're thinking, I'm also thinking about acreage. So size of what's there in regards to the density too. So does that have to be considered as well? Do we have to look at that, okay, if it's a certain size or it's not, as far as, I'm just thinking size of acreage, and I'm thinking about our current situation. That's why I brought that up. Yeah, I get your point about the density, so that's why I was asking the question as a follow-up.
I mean, let's face the reality of a community of Breezy Point, right? I mean, given the amount of land that was subdivided years ago,
Right.
The density of it, we're at a far different population saturation and density than a lot of our surrounding communities, like
Correct.
Pequot, who have much smaller overall, residential lots and a lot more multifamily. Because really, when you look at that park dedication statute, a lot of the intent behind it was as a community adds population, increases density in certain areas of a community, it creates some level of stress and added pressure on park and rec facilities, and therefore whoever is engaging in the subdivision and increasing the population and density ought to contribute towards the public needs and improvements that are required. So when I think of somebody coming in my mind, doing a simple lot split of 10 acres into 2 5-acre parcels, I mean, I have a hard time making any argument as to why a park dedication of land or a fee would come into play.
I guess I'm just curious if some of these other communities have language in there now that is more elaborate than what's here. Just because if they have in there, they have the 10% land or these unit prices, do they also have 10% of the fair market value like we do, or do they not have the fair market value in
They
lieu of
have
the
fair
unit
market value,
prices?
they have all three.
They have all three, and they ask the city in each case is deciding.
The city
How
council
that's
is the
determined?
decision maker.
Okay, so there should be language in there for how that's done? I mean, I just think that would help, like, flush out some of these questions. I mean, I generally agree that if it's if it's like an apartment, or if it's like, 10 houses or something like that, that the dedication fee should be more.
Yep.
If it's just splitting a lot, one person into two,
Correct.
then it's very different. I mean, I think it's as simple as that, but.
The one thing that I think is unique in Breezy that probably is not as apparent in some of these other communities is that any new subdivision in Breezy is probably going to have at least a 2.5 acre minimum lot size. So there isn't going to be a lot of density. I'm sure that as the city goes down the road of reevaluating that zoning ordinance, I'm sure that lot size will be a discussion going forward as far as whether that 2.5 acres is really a legitimate size that you want to continue to maintain. I'm not advocating for one or the other. I'm just trying to point out that any new subdivision in Breezy right now is a 2.5 acre minimum lot size.
Do you know do you recall, Jerry, what in Cross Lake, the 1,500 per each new lot, did it matter on what size the lots were?
No, it did not. It was just basically per lot. Now, Cross Lake, I know only because I was part of that discussion earlier last year. They basically had a 2 acre minimum in most of the areas, and they were going down to an acre minimum lot size where you could rezone down to an acre in size. So they were increasing the density in a lot of areas in Cross Lake. That's very recent.
Was any of that related to access to sewer?
No,
No.
Well, yeah, so we've got some, from this comes more questions. I think maybe to get us moved off center, I would, this is just a recommendation again to the council, and whatever they decide to do, I'm open to listening to as well, but maybe what we should do is try to see if we can get some language drafted that kind of addresses what we're bringing up, that we can take a look at and say, okay, how do we want to put this in? I mean, I hear per dwelling. I also hear the density piece. So maybe, with those options of language in there, giving the council that authority to make the decision of what that is. Because, I mean, I think that's kind of where we're going. I think everybody understands that we want to change it. So I think that's what I hear. That's what I'm hearing is that we need to make some changes to our current policy. What does that ordinance look like then with some drafted language that looks like per dwelling, with maybe some other language added to it? Or maybe I heard Jerry make a comment that, was it Nisswa? I think you said there were three options they had. So they had the
They all have the three options.
three options.
Yeah.
So maybe that's something that we need to have drafted up and brought back to us to look at to see what that looks like, and then we can make a decision on what we're comfortable with. I think the other thing we need to think about is what are we gonna put for a fee on that if we go per dwelling? What does that look like? So I think we need to be thinking about that too. Do we wanna talk about that now and get something out there so that if we draft the language, that's included in it when it comes back to us? When I look at the money, when I look at what's being done right now, Brainerd's 500 single dwelling per buildable lot. You've got Nisswa doing a 416 per expected resident. You heard Jerry comment, it's about 2.3 is what they figure. So that's about $1,000. You got Cross Lake on 1,500 for each new lot, and then you got Pequot with 416 per expected resident. And then they have that little thing in there about subdivision of 3 or more lots. So they throw that in there too. So, you know, I'm somebody who's an advocate. I think that we should have it per dwelling as an option for us. And if I just had to put a number out there, when I look at what's out there right now, I'd say like 1,000 per dwelling. And that's just me looking at what's there and going, I think this is an equitable number. I'm not stuck on that. I'm putting it out there for us to,
I think that would be a good starting point, for sure.
and we can always change it. It's the idea of drafting the language and bringing it back to us. And at the end of the day, if we've come back after we've thought about it and done more research and said, no, we don't like 1,000, we should have it less or more. Jerry?
If you're going to amend the ordinance, which would be the proper way to do that.
Yes.
We could draft some language.
Yep.
And we can put X amount in it. That said, you have two opportunities when you look at that ordinance. You have the first reading
Yep.
and a second reading.
Correct.
So you're going to have 2 months in between where you can, if you decide that 1,000 or 700 or 600, whatever that dollar figure is, you can make those adjustments. You're going to have at least 2 months to do that.
Perfect. Thank you, Jerry, for that clarification. So I would say, if the council is okay with this, and I want to hear, to direct the staff to go ahead and draft language for us to amend this ordinance to add an option for us of a single dwelling at 1,000 per dwelling, and give us the other option, so we have all three options in there. So we have one, let's have them draft language to add the other two in it and bring it back to us, and let's review it, and then we can take it from there. Is the council comfortable with that? I agree. Okay,
I'd like to see us something of considering again population and density, right? So when we have situations like I think was used as an example last month with the White Birch development going on by the golf course, right? I mean, you're looking at a lot of different density on that property. Different than if I'm buying a 2.5 acre parcel to build a house on. I can probably provide for my own recreation for kids and whatever within that, right? So we're talking about a much different density and need when it comes to park and park dedication. Somehow, I don't know how we get there. I'd like to see us consider and look at something that puts a little bit more focus and priority on more dedication, a higher fee, given a certain population being created, and that amount being reduced as you're dealing with a subdivision of less and less density.
Is that sort of the discretion between the three different options, though, that would be left to the city? So,
Yeah.
like, the city could potentially say, okay, if you're one person splitting 2 lots, then you're gonna get the per dwelling. I mean, we could choose, you know, to do per dwelling for that person, but if somebody is doing, you know, a development with 20 houses, then no, it's 10% of the land.
Or an equivalent per
Or an
residential
equivalent fair
unit.
market value of that land, yeah.
It just feels to me like it should be in some way kind of connected to or used as a measure as to, again, the number of people that are being added to the community, right? And ultimately how that is going to put additional stress on our park and rec services and infrastructure.
Well, and your point is valid, and I agree. I mean, we should add something in there. It makes me wonder if that's why Pequot's got that little piece in there that says a subdivision of 3 or more lots.
But doesn't that still accomplish if we do per dwelling?
Yeah,
If you have let's say a 10-acre parcel
Yeah.
and I divide it by 4,
Right.
that's 4 dwellings.
Right.
But if I'm going to do a smaller CIP, a subdivision like White Birch Estates, and you do 20, well then that's still 20 dwellings. Regardless of how big the lot size is, there's still going to be a use potential case for who's going there. I mean, one could argue, well, they're White Birch Estates, they're for senior community living, they're not going to use Park and Rec. Well, I have a 2.5-acre parcel, I don't need to use Park and Rec. There's always going to be an argument that somebody could argue and say, this is why I don't need Park and Rec, therefore I don't need to pay the fee. Where if it's just based on a dwelling, that it's an expected of who could potentially use our Park and Rec amenities, fishing pier, playground, everything that's in the Park and Rec, boat launch. Everybody potentially could use those services. If we start getting into how big is the property, is it on a lake? I don't need to go for a boat launch. I don't need to pay for this. It starts getting muddly, where I think if you do it upon a per unit, it still kind of accomplishes the potential for who's going to be using it.
Well, they all have all 3 options, though. All the cities have all 3 options. None of them have just one per dwelling fee.
Yeah.
But, I mean, they must be sorting through that somehow already. There's got to be some standard there. for
well,
that.
I would say this. Let's push it back to staff, have them draft some language for us on 3 options. They've heard our concerns, all of them. We've got a couple more times to look at it, as Jerry stated, so it's not like, we're stuck with what comes, and then we can have further discussion on it at that time once we see the language. And then maybe there's also some other information we can gain from how the city's got their 3 options written in there to help, and I would assume staff's gonna look at that as well when they look at our language and draft it, so.
Would the first reading still be in July?
It could be.
Okay.
I would say probably, yeah, so we can keep it moving forward. Why push it off another month? So I would say let's shoot for July for the first reading and go from there. All right. If everybody's good with that, I'm going to move on. All right, item 12, signage, Shoreview Lane. Councilmember Jensen.
I requested this item. It's kind of been ongoing for years and gotten a lot worse. The city owns land on both the east and west side that abuts property owners to the north and the south. Over the years, there's been a large portion of the shoreline that's, the cattails have been destroyed with ATVs and snowmobiles, primarily in the winter. The winter of 2023 and last year, especially 2023, there was about a 12-foot chunk of land, about 6 feet wide, that was basically created a hole. The city, I mentioned it to Joe, they came out with their dump truck, and I don't know, 1 to 2 yards of gravel to fix it. And then last winter, guides in the area, I don't believe they were Breezy Point guides, used it as lake access, which the city has public access. We have a swimming beach. We have overflow parking. That was never intended to be a public access to the lake. To prevent further damage, I would like to see signage put there that there's no lake access. Start with 1 sign, possibly go up to 2 and monitor it. My fear is they start heading north and damaging, the rest of the shoreline, which if that continues to happen, the city needs to engage the DNR hydrologist, because really some of that falls under their jurisdiction too. But to start, I'd like to see one sign placed there, possibly to preserve the shoreline.
So, and Councilmember Jensen did approach me about this as well, and talked with me about this. It was something that I had mentioned. However, I would like to get some input from our public works director with regards to that. I know, Joe, you're aware of that area down there. While signage is an option, is there something else that potentially we could do that might be a better fit? And I say that only because if we're going through the process to do something with it, what's the best, what's our best solution? So I guess, the idea of a sign is something that often pops up and says, let's put up a sign. But then that may not be the best solution to the situation.
Typically, when we're looking for non-invasive, kind of a passive way to control people, is a split rail fencing. Where the old Noxie site, we used that, didn't require signage. It's relatively inexpensive. We can install it. The swimming beach, split rail fence, something like that. It's under 6 feet. It's on our property. We don't need a permit. It's an option outside of signs, I guess, that I can think of.
Okay. And maybe that's something that we would do instead that might work better than signs. I mean, there is a downfall of a sign, and that is if you put them up with a couple of stakes, it doesn't mean they can't go in between them.
Well, I think boulders over those signs. If you get enough snow, they'll just drive right through it. I mean, they drove right through the cattails, destroyed the shoreline because of the warmer winters. That's what really impacts it. I mean, you can try it, but I see more.
The fence, you're saying?
Yeah, the more potential damage to the fence.
They're gonna try to drive over it, is that what you're thinking?
Yeah.
Paul Snow against it too.
So therein lies the problem, right? Likely at the end of the day is how do you manage access or limit access during the wintertime for people onto a lake? I think it's one of those things that's as close to impossible as you can have. Signs are not gonna do it, unless you're, fixing to put up a 20-foot high fence. That's likely not gonna do it. You start throwing other obstacles in the way, like large boulders and things along those lines, then you potentially run into the issue of if someone damages their vehicle on it, then how do we become liable? Because that's nothing that they would anticipate necessarily having been there. I understand the concerns, I do. Oddly enough, this is an issue that I think has been recycled off and on again over quite a number of years. And I just don't think ultimately you get there. Truly, managing access within city limits on any lake, whether it's Pelican or you name it. I mean, if there's damage, to vegetation being done or to the shoreline itself, then to me that almost feels like it's more of a specific DNR-related interest and issue. And Steve, I think you alluded to that to some extent.
Well, for the rest of the cattails, but then the question is, how do you prevent the access? It's just gonna keep going on. It's gonna then it turns into paddle boards, everything in the summer. It becomes a local lake access. We have a boat ramp. We have, parking lots, and there's multiple accesses. It's just gonna get worse.
Yeah, I understand. And unfortunately, I think in a lot of those cases, it really is going to result into some safety-specific incident, right, occurring before there's probably, that end of the day kind of what's the most feasible management approach to take.
I guess.
That's kind of that's kind of the back and forth, right, with lakes as public amenities, you know, they belong and are owned by all of us. And to try to steer and suggest that people ought to access in certain ways or only in specific ways and not in others, I don't know.
Other comments from council members? Councilmember Ball, Councilmember Maroney?
I think DNR should be consulted a little bit. I mean,
Yeah.
we're limiting access from a public property to a public lake. I understand concerns from, you know, the improvements we just did, the shore view to the vegetation. That's where I think if the DNR sees a concern from the lakeside, they should be involved and consulted. But we also have you know, an obligation to protect what we just did to protect the road as well. But, you know, we are talking about restricting public access from a public property. So it's a fine line of discussing of how can we properly go with that, and I think the DNR would be probably a good consult to ask them how to properly go about this, because we're talking two different things. We're talking public road and the improvements we did, and then the public lake, and I think that's where our jurisdiction kind of falls off. And I think there's something that can be blended, but I think the DNR should be consulted.
Oh, I definitely think the DNR should.
Yeah, I think they might have some good advice, having probably dealt with it before. And I do have some, as Councilman Scott alluded to, some safety concerns with, you know, for sure boulders. You know, I don't know from a sign or a fence perspective, like if there's some visibility there that could be managed, but certainly that would be a concern.
Okay, so here's what I would say then, in hearing, and I understand the concerns, and I see both sides of the coin. And I also see the public access piece with the lake property and how the Department of Natural Resources may need to be involved. So here's what I would recommend. Maybe at this time, we have Joe get with the Department of Natural Resources, have a discussion with them about that piece, maybe even set up a time where you can take them down there so they can see it specifically. Find out what they would recommend. They may have some very specific things that says, well, time out, you guys can't do anything because it's this and this. And if that's the case, then that may be. And there is a potential, there is, because I do know that there are some laws that they have in the state regarding public roads, public access to lakes. There's some different things like that. So maybe we can have Joe get the information, report to us back at the next council meeting on it. We can have it back on the agenda again, and he can give us some ideas from there, and then maybe that gives us a clear direction of what way we need to go.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right. So I think that's what we'll do. I think that's a good thing, and we can address that at that time to see just what they say. And they may, because let's face it, the DNR deal with it all the time, all over the state. We got over 11,000 lakes. So they have a lot of those issues that pop up from time to time on things like that. So they have some, I'm sure, some good plans and ideas in place. If there's ways to limit the access, what does it look like? So I think that way we're on the same page with
Well,
them.
and I think with any lake access, I mean, if there's access there, there needs to be parking, you know, I mean, there's a whole lot that goes with that too for public access to lakes.
So we can, let's get some more information.
Yeah, I agree, because
Okay.
they should have been involved actually years ago.
So let's do it, and then that's good, because we have that information as we move forward.
Correct.
So probably not the last time it's gonna come up. All right, sounds good. Item 13, LELS notice to negotiate 13A law enforcement labor services.
Just a notification that the police union contract expires at the end of this year, and they're wishing to start negotiations.
Okay,
My suggestion is that the issue be given to the Personnel Committee.
Yep.
And they can start those discussions.
I agree. So Personnel Committee. That's Councilmember Ball and Councilmember Maroney. We'll have you guys, I know you guys have gone through that process before, so you're familiar with it. And we'll allow you guys to start that, and we'll get working on it. Of course, we'll have our legal end of it involved as well, and whatever else you guys feel you need for resource support. So let us know, or let me know.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we'll get that moved forward. Item 14, discussion security for compost brush disposal site 7947 Dakota Drive, 14A compost brush disposal site letter. Commissioner Bontek, you got anything you want to add?
Actually,
Comments?
I think that the letter is self-explanatory.
It is.
Councilmember Jansen was the person who received that letter and actually has requested that it be on an agenda.
Yep.
Therefore, it's before you. I think there's some legitimate concern about securing that site and keeping it for residents only. What is the easiest method to do that? I guess we really don't know. What I think what was suggested here was some kind of a card system and a gated system. I would believe that is probably a decent option. I have no idea what something like that would cost. I think we probably should gather some costs as far as a gate system and look at including that in next year's budget.
This was a email that I received as well, and that was my first thought, is now with enhancements coming to our public safety building and City Hall, we'll have digital card read access, we'll have IP-based camera systems, and so to get another, you would have to have a monthly service of an internet connection at the site, but you would have the ability to deploy IP cameras and IP-type card reader system or gate control system that could interface with what we have. And so if we can go down that path and start investigating those costs and potentially get that into next year's budget, it's something that could interface well within our enhancements that we're doing to both public safety building and City Hall.
Well, and we discussed this at length before as a council. And, I mean, it was brought up to move it. We had directed staff at the time to look to moving it. The pit off of Bushman was one of the areas. But, Public Works, because they burned it off in the winter, the location was chosen due to the fact it was the least impactful to the neighborhoods. We need to do something. It's abused by commercial vehicles or commercial tree removal services. I've seen it myself. And the safety to the neighborhood. I mean, it is in a neighborhood and it increases traffic. We have to be cognizant of that, and this time around, we need to do something to alleviate it for the, traffic in the neighborhoods, regulate it. It is for residents only. I think part of the problem was for years it was on Crow Wing County's website, and in very small print, it said for Breezy Point residents only. But there's residents outside the community. And really, for the neighborhood, we need to get traffic under control, regulate hours. That's not to say that if a Breezy Point resident has a commercial tree service, they should be able to use it, but they'll have to, give them their card however they choose to do it. But budgeting, obviously, it's a 2026 item. To Michael's point, when you put equipment like that out there, though, you need climate-controlled, boxes, and
This one too.
it obviously can't sit outside in 30
Do we
below.
have anything on the south side of that?
So, I think it's a good idea. We need to solve it one way or another.
Councilmember Ball.
Yeah, I appreciate Joe bringing this back to us. We did discuss it. I don't really recall why or it dropped off and it never came back up for discussion. I know the only other option for placement we talked about that we hadn't revisited was potentially over where the ponds are, which would impact, the space we have for the ponds for the sewer. So absent moving it, I think putting in some sort of access is probably the best way to go. I know there was some concerns about elderly residents and their ability to still use it if somebody else was helping them, with materials, so we all have to kind of deal with that during the discussion, I think, still with that card access, but hopefully they can kind of coordinate with the person that's helping them if we have some sort of card access, so, yeah. I'm in favor of it if we aren't moving it. Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments? Councilmember Scott, anything?
Yeah, I mean, I received this note as well and appreciate Joe bringing it forward. I would go so far as to say that this probably, fell prey to a lot of other things going on last year, I believe it was, potentially the year before when we were talking about this. We had quite a number of other projects going on and priorities taking place, and there's only so much that realistically staff are able to follow up with and get back to the council on. So I like the idea, certainly, of managing an amenity like this in a way that assures, to the extent possible, that our residents and residents only are using it. I still don't believe that the site is located where it should be. As I remember, quite a bit of the conversation that the council had at the time was several residents in that area coming forward and expressing, in fact, safety concerns, speed issues, large vehicles entering the site, mainly, I think, commercial type vehicles and outfits. And to me, no matter how I look at it, I just don't think that access and locating an amenity, a service to the community in a residential area is a good mix of use and where people live. I would continue to support us taking a look at what other land does this city own where something like this could be located, maybe in more of a fenced controlled access secure area, and if there isn't availability of any land in the city, then where could we potentially see opportunity on the edge of the corporate limits to potentially acquire land that would be removed from a residential area, more sort of from an access standpoint and overall situated where it's just not going to continue to create concerns of safety for residents in its use. But very much support whatever the approach and idea is with managing access. We had talked about, as I recall, at the same time too, do we hire, a student or whomever during the summer to actively be down there during the majority of daylight hours? I mean, I think we all understand the challenges that come with that. You can only expect somebody to work just so many hours in a day. And, you're not going to likely deter everyone that's kind of abusing the situation from continuing to access it. So, yeah, it's, to me, a combination of things that really should continue to be looked into. And, but a lot of it for me goes down to we have to locate it in an area that's more conducive, given the use to it, and just keeping it out of a fairly heavily residential area.
Okay. Well, for me, it's new, because I wasn't on the council when this all got brought up, so it's a new one. And I did receive the letter as well, just so everybody's aware. So I thank the letter for coming forward. In listening to all the information, because again, it's the education process of what the past was. And so I see both of them. I mean, I understand the concept of a residential area and having that where it's at. I don't think it's something maybe we should forget about, but I think at this point we've got it there, it's established. Are there things that we can do to help alleviate some of the problems? I think at the end of the day, no matter where you put it, you're always going to have issues. Now, I think you can alleviate some of those issues by having it maybe in a little more of a remote area, but then at the same time, that creates problems too. So I see both sides of that coin, but I think ultimately maybe what we should be doing is looking at what does something like this cost, how does it look, and then have staff get us that information so that it can be included in the budget process for next year, so that we can take a look at budgeting for it, to do something, to put something in place to help with that. And the concept of maybe potentially sometime having somebody there as a part-time summer person or something, might be something we look at down the line. I wouldn't be opposed to that, but I agree, you can't have somebody there all the time, every day and 24 hours a day. It doesn't work. But that's where the gated system would work with the card and having the connection back to our better, infrastructure we're gonna have now with the new city hall and some of our technology. So I guess what I would say, the council's comfortable with it, have staff go ahead, put together a cost estimate of what it would look like for something of that nature, so that we can take a look at it and addressing to put it into next year's budget. And then that would come to he can get it off to our administrator and we can look at it through the finance committee as we budget for next year. What does that look like? Put it in the budget to have it happen and then work to have it put in place. Is the council comfortable with that at this time?
Yeah, as long as we not only keep in mind the capital costs, the initial investment, but I can tell you firsthand in dealing with site security through my work, these are very maintenance intensive. They tend to, give way to breakdowns and issues with opening and closing in winter conditions, and just so people are going into this with the understanding that it's not just the capital upfront costs. You're going to have quite a bit of ongoing maintenance needs and repairs, and it's not a inexpensive level of security to operate.
Yeah, and I would agree with you 100% on that, because with any time you build anything or add anything, you always have the cost of maintaining it as you move forward. It doesn't matter what kind of system it is, whether it's a building or whether it's a security system or whatever. So I think those are things we have to look at as well and think about as we go forward with this. But I think we have to work forward in the idea of what does that look like, so that we're addressing this again as we move forward, based on what I'm hearing the council wanting to do. So if everybody's comfortable with that, that's what I'll direct staff to do, is to look at getting some costs put together that we can look at for potential budgeting next year. Maybe as a part of that, what are things maintenance wise that we have to anticipate and look for too? I don't know. So,
Potential maintenance
yeah,
contract.
right, or something like that. So to add in there so we can kind of see what that true number is. And we're not going to have it 100%, but we've got to start somewhere. So I would say let's do that and we can go from there. So if staff's comfortable with that, okay. All right, we'll move forward from that then. Number 15, City Hall, high-tech pay application number 815A, high-tech invoice number 8. We have it in our packet. Is there any information beyond that we need, Administrator Bonsack? Pretty straightforward.
Actually, I could probably give you an update of where that building is at.
Let's do that. That'd be a good time to do it.
The carpet is in.
Okay.
The tile has been in the entry, has been put down. They're grouting it today and tomorrow. Part of the counter has been installed today. The asphalt in the front parking and the parking area was installed today. We anticipate that the furnishings are going to come next Monday, a week from today. The fire suppression folks are back and doing some testing.
Okay.
The well has been flushed and tested.
Okay.
I'm anticipating that we're probably going to be in that section around July 1st.
All right.
That said, the council chambers will be at least a month behind that.
Yep.
So you're probably going to be here to around September. Yeah, it's progressing faster than we thought it was going to happen. It's starting to come together. It's starting to look like a building.
Good. Yeah, no. I was in last week and did a little walkthrough. I attended the construction meeting and it's really coming together. It's looking really nice. The carpet was going down. The walls are painted, the tiles all in. I think they were gonna grout here in the next few days. They were doing all the work to lay the asphalt, so, it is looking really nice, and it's gonna be a very great place for, staff to use and the public to come and be involved in there as well, so, and, yeah, we understand we'll be sitting here for a couple more months, but that's all right, as long as Chief tolerates us a little more longer, we'll be good, so. Then we'll give his space back to him and we'll go back to our place.
He will tolerate it as long as you sign his check.
All right, so, thank you for the update. So we have the high-tech invoice number 8. Do I have a motion to approve that invoice?
So moved.
I have a motion from Councilmember Ball. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Councilmember Maroney. Any discussion?
Just one thing to clarify, there's a change order of just over 80,000. Is that for the installation of the well?
The
You know?
80,000?
Yeah.
That, it was a negative from the contract. The 80,000 is for the furniture.
And it's a positive. So in other
Yep.
words, it's a pullout.
It's a pullout, but
Yeah, I know.
it's there. It was taken onto the contract with High Tech, and it was bought by the city directly.
That was to alleviate sales tax, right?
Sales tax and
On the purchase.
overhead, so
Yeah.
Any other questions or discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions? Motion carries. All right, we'll move to item 16. I'm now going to suspend the regular session and move to closed session to discuss land acquisition for Bushman Road with WSB.